LaFayette, the president of American Baptist College. And Dr. LaFayette has given us some remembrances of his time with Dr. Martin Luther King. And of course, Dr. LaFayette, before we left for our first commercial break, you were telling us about aspects of Dr. Martin Luther King and some of the things in his, as part of his personality. But let's look at the civil rights movement in its entirety from the point of view of post-1960 and after 1960. Exactly what did it mean to live in a segregated America at the time? Not only a segregated South, but a segregated America. And let's look at it so for those of our viewers who might not understand what the celebration is all about, let's look at it from that perspective.
Well, it's hard for some people to conceive or even imagine that you were allowed to shop in a department store at all the other counters. You could buy whatever radios, you could buy shoes, you could buy other kinds of items, but you were not allowed to sit at the eating facility, whether it was a restaurant or a lunch counter. And many of our department stores at that time, here in Nashville, for example, Kane Sloan's and Harvey's, you were not allowed to eat. Even if you had the money, but you were not allowed to eat. Now, it's interesting that they would allow you to have takeout. There was a little takeout counter on the side. You could stand. But it was something about sitting down that they found very offensive. In fact, it's hard to believe the laws. There were actually laws that made it illegal for black people and white people to sit down in the same restaurant. So even if the restaurant owner wanted to provide services for everyone and didn't care, he would be in violation of the law.
And so the laws had the police authority of the state to back them up, and so it was not really the ability of just the general population.
Or individual proprietor.
It had to do that.
Sure. Individual proprietor, you couldn't decide how you're going to run your place or who you were going to serve. And it was very interesting that this kind of policy continued to prevail. They were afraid. White people who owned places were afraid to serve blacks, even if they wanted to, because they would be in violation of the law, and they could be arrested for violating the law. Same thing with hotels. Black people could not go to the Howard Johnson's or the Holiday Inn and check in like anyone else now. We take for granted, as you point out, or the restaurants as well. You could not have it. Everything had to be strictly segregated. So this was, first of all, we felt it was immoral. Because what was the message? The reason why there was segregation is because it implied that blacks and whites were not equal, and that blacks were inferior, therefore whites were superior, and that the blacks could not sit in the same place where whites were eating. And
so this not only included eating, this education facilities and on down the line.
Absolutely. Sports, you could not play against each other's teams, like we have here in our colleges and universities. In fact, you could not sit in the same classroom at the university. And in one case, they did allow you to open up and sit in the same classroom, but then you couldn't live in the dormitories. The athletes, for example, when they would allow you to play on the football team, but you couldn't stay in the
dormitory.
Yeah, dormitory, the same facilities. And little children, as well as adults, had to be subjugated to that kind of attitude. And well, they say, well, what was the problem? They said, well, we were not socially equal, we're not intellectually equal, so therefore we could not sit together. And it was something about that. Now, I don't remember the elevators being segregated. So it was a sit-down thing. As long as you were standing up, like you were in a crowd or whatever, that was okay. But they had the hospitals that were segregated. And some hospitals had different floors. Floors for black people. Now the doctors can go back and forth. Many blacks had white doctors. But even the taxi cabs in some places, white cab drivers could not drive blacks, and black cab drivers could not drive whites. I mean, the local law made it impossible. So we decided that, you know, this was ridiculous. And we had to do something about it. And we began to raise the question. And the way we raised the question was through direct action. We said that, no, there's something immoral about this. It's a negative statement on a whole group of people. And here in Nashville, we have doctors, lawyers, intelligent people. I don't know if you remember this, but we had blacks on the city council, but had to drink out of segregated water fountains at City Hall. Of course, the jails were segregated. It didn't make sense. But I think it fell actually on the weight of its own ignorance. Because I think whites were tired of this kind of thing too, because it was living a lie. Because the segregation itself implied inequality and unequal status of people because of their race, the color of their skin. Had nothing to do with their intelligence, their background, or their interests, or the culture. And here at the same time, for example, in Nashville, you had artists, and you had Honorable Tem. You had people who were great writers. You know, James Weldon Johnson. You know, I mean, Nashville has produced all kind of, here you had the Jubilee singers who would go around the world and sing and be treated in royal fashion. But when they came back to Nashville, you know, they were just like boys and girls who were, you know, servants of some sort. But all those things, fortunately, have come to pass to a certain degree. And at least the law has changed. You cannot legally segregate against a person or discriminate because of their color of their skin. But these are things that we don't want to forget, because this is the thing that Martin Luther King died for. He fought for, and many others died for in the struggle, and many people were jailed. I myself was jailed about 23 times. I don't regret any moment I ever spent in jail. Although I tell you, when I look at the ghost of Mississippi, Mississippi Burning, it does have a psychological effect, because I know that in any instance, I could have been a victim.
Very good. And of course, Dr. LaFayette,